Without further ado, I'm just going to turn it over to Jacob McGuinness, who, like I said, was our grand prize winner in the latest iteration of Living Image. And he is one of the artists in our spring exhibition. So take it away.
Sweet. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Dale. This is I'm very new to Zoom. I've avoided it for very long, so bear with me. But I'm going to talk about, I've got a slide presentation, and I'm going to talk sort of about a bunch of projects that I've worked on and tests that I've done that sort of led up to the work that's going to be on view opening this weekend at Halide. So let me share this. Okay. Can everybody see it? Dale? Cool. So I'm gonna start with, there we go. This was sort of like an introduction for me into looking at photography in a different way. In 2017, I started going on these walks and taking collections of plants and different material that I would find on the walks and making pretty large scale photograms on silver gelatin paper with them. And here's like a picture of it up. But this sort of like led me down a way of thinking about photography a little bit differently and opening me up to different ways of image making, and also starting to sort of split up scenes into different small components, which I think you'll see when I share some of my current work, that's like a big part of a lot of fracturing of small or bigger things into small, um, tiny little bits. This was the first pinhole camera I got. I made some like crappy pinhole cameras before this, but if people aren't totally familiar with a pinhole camera, it's just a hole in a box. Inside this, there's a small piece of brass with a hole in it, and back in the back of it, um, you would put 4x5 sheets of film and expose them. And I worked on a project of portraits of myself and my family at the time, my family. And I made these salt prints. I was really into like the exposure times of pinhole photography. So these all took 20 minutes to expose, and it really changed the process of taking a photograph and the process of also being photographed into a more like meditative um, state where you're like kind of capturing time in a different way. And then even in printing them, like I started to be much more interested in the quality of prints. I think before this, I was doing more street photography, and I was still in the dark room, but there's something about like alternative processes and being able to put, emulsions and light sensitive materials on these really beautiful papers that like makes them pop and be able to get tones that are surprising and interesting. So yeah, this series, they're pretty large salt prints on full size platine paper, arches platine. But yeah, that was sort of my introduction, like biggest pinhole thing at the start of my work. I later took those cameras that I used for that project and made some work in the Everglades. It didn't really turn into a full project, but still sort of getting used to using pinhole cameras and seeing their limitations and also what they're good at. I wasn't really at the point where I was making a lot of cameras at this point, but you do sort of start to learn what the cameras you have do, and how they differ and how they're easier than maybe a traditional large format camera, but also sometimes, you know, sometimes more challenging, and figuring out things like reciprocity failure and things that you don't deal with as much with a typical camera. But yeah, so I was doing like a lot of landscapes and still working with the cameras that I had gotten. And then it sort of led me to like making my own cameras. So this is basically the same design as the cameras that I have, but it's like an ultra wide format. It's pretty messy around the where the pinhole is, just because I wanted to make it able to exchange the pinholes and change them around. But yeah, this camera made, a much wider image, and kind of got me excited about being able to think about what camera I would want to make to fulfill some sort of image making. And it started to push like when the image was made back to like designing a camera. So if I wanted to make an image, I started thinking of like, well, what camera would I design to make that, or how would the light work if I mess around with this. Here's just another more straightforward pinhole picture. But that sort of I started working on a lot of different projects at the same time at this point. This was another camera I made, and it looks kind of insane, but it looks insane probably because it's all stuff I purchased from the dollar store. So like the entire camera, every part of it is just a piece from the dollar store. The bellows are trash bags. The lens is like a credit card magnifying glass type of thing made out of plastic. The To control the bellows, there's these like rods. I'm not sure if you guys can see my mouse, but these are like, they have a little magnet on the end of it and they extend, but it's kind of perfect for a bellow or for to control and be able to focus your camera. I couldn't think of a way to do ground glass, so I made like a hole here, and you actually just focus it by looking through this hole and then close that hole to take your picture. Here it is. I carry it around. It's really lightweight and hard to use in the wind, but like some of those things that would be frustrating if you like bought a camera when you're making these cameras, it's like a lot. I find myself way less stressed about, oh, this part doesn't work because you made it and you can fix it, and the limitations almost are like a fun aspect. So I'm not like, oh, my camera's not doing this, it's so frustrating. It's like, yeah, that's like, I've become much more accepting of my equipment. Here's like a view through the ground glass, which isn't real ground glass. You're just looking at, I just put a sheet of white paper in a 4x5 film holder and focus it that way. And here's a picture from the camera. This is like wide open, so it's as soft as it gets, but these are like plastic flowers from the dollar store, sort of going full circle with the dollar store camera. But like out in the field, it can take a much sharper image. So this is like on a paper negative. Here's a portrait wide open, but I don't know. It was kind of just like a fun exercise. I haven't really made a project from it, but a lot of the things that I make have become like uh, leading into other projects, or maybe informing me. Like a lot of like, I feel like for a lot of these things, it's about learning about light and about the way cameras work, and having that sort of be a driving force in what is interesting, and being surprised and seeing like, oh, this seems a little magical or something like that, and kind of letting that guide what I'm looking for. So a lot of things don't turn into projects, or they take, years of like messing around with them, and the project's completely different than what you expected. Um, and this is like leading to, this is probably the first camera that sort of is reminiscent of the stuff in the show that is coming up. This is a pinhole camera made out of a 4x5 box with 12 apertures and there's no structure inside, which I started to add structure later on, but these allow for like blending of different images together. So each one of these is an individual picture with a strobe inside like a dark room. Um, but this would be one picture and another picture and another picture. But then when they're all together, it sort of blends in this like cool ethereal way. So that was like the first camera that I made that I was like, okay, this is doing something different than a sort of traditional camera would, and got me interested in multiple apertures, which is like a lot of my work now has like hundreds or even over 1,000 pinhole apertures. And here's another, like, I think this is sort of that's taken with the same camera, but and this sort of led me to making sort of segmented little things. But each one of these was just taken behind, I had a black like cutout of paper and a strobe behind that paper. So I would illuminate myself with these flashes in each individual one of the 12 apertures at a time, removing one piece of tape at a time. And it sort of started to look like these little cells. And I still like, I'm interested in doing that, but it made me sort of interested in being like, oh, I could make a structured camera that just like does this. Like, I don't have the paper anymore. I'm just like, and you could make tons of different designs and different like shapes that like almost collage together. Um, this was sort of a learning experiment about how things, how light adds up when you have multiple apertures, which I made a diagram later on that'll explain it a lot better. But light just inverts in a really weird way. Like if you know the way light goes into a pinhole, it flips it, but it flips it in every direction. And if things are connected together, they don't end up where you think they would. So when you have multiple apertures, it it becomes like a surprise of like, wow, I really didn't expect this to look like this. Um, here's another uh, picture of that I made with that camera. But I'm going to transition into more like this is between that camera and my other work, where I've added these cells that basically just block off the light, and these slides where you can slide the slide through the track and replace it with another blank slide. So you can do each shutter individually one at a time, or you could do them three at a time or however you'd like. But um, with this, I was trying to do sort of too much at once, but I was testing this camera and I was using a red filter, a blue filter, and a green filter to try and get. So this would be like a red, all of these were with a red filter, with a green filter, and with a blue filter, trying to get a full color image out of a black and white photo. But again, just like messing around because they're all a little different when you combine them. It's a little, everything's slightly spaced away. But yeah. Um, and then so this is at the point where like I put as many cells as was comfortable to make before being like, this is gonna, I need to find a new tool, a new way to make these, because it takes a really long time to make one of these cameras and to get each individual hole in the right spot and to make sure the cells are the right size and that they're light proof and that it's comfortable to use. um, so I was like, at this point, trying to figure out other ways of making cameras and trying to problem solve and think about what tool could I get to make it a little bit easier. Um, this is, I've been trying to take a picture of trying to do a project on Levittown for a really long time. And I still haven't been able to really come up with one, but I like this. I really like the Becker's work, Bird and Hilla, and their like typologies, and I all the houses in Levittown, which is right by where I live in Pennsylvania, are like there's like four standard houses, and they're I don't know. I've been trying to photograph it for years, but this camera, I was like, okay, this could be a cool like combination of segmenting this town and doing all these individual pictures. Um, I started to like think about the way film is shaped in the camera, like which you don't really do with most traditional cameras. Your film is on a flat plane, but not all, but most. Um, and so with this camera, the film is like fed through here, and there's different holes all along the edge. There's 7 different apertures, and so you get an exposure that sort of segments the film and does a panorama at the same time where some things add up. And I had, each one of these is an individual picture, but I had the subject move from frame to frame so that they'd be repeated. But you get things that are weird where it's like this tree stops and then goes because the way it's flipped, but I'll go over that later. I also was trying to make so many cameras out of straws. Um, it's like kind of like a beehive pattern. And I wanted to try to make one out of like an actual beehive at some point, but I was making a lot of straw designs and I kept making them super long and they wouldn't photograph anything. Here you can see like it's a little bit shorter and you can see my face here in this test. But yeah, I was trying that for a long time. I made so many of these cameras, and a lot of them would come out more like this. This is actually more successful than some of them. Like, but this would be like that's kind of the shading of one of my eyes, and this is the dark side of my face, and depending on the lighting. But this would be like the interior of it as I was building it. But they're they take a long time to make, and they're really hard to get. I mean, they taught me about how far, and if you change the cell size and it's like a normal length, you get all these interactions with light where it just blows out into these like kind of star shapes, and the light moves around too much. Here's a some other cameras that are inspired by this is actually part of the thrifted pinhole camera challenge that Heather puts on. But this I made out of a tin can, but I added a structure inside of it. I was actually made from it's like an aquarium lid type of thing that divides up an aquarium. But yeah, so you can then remove one of these one at a time in order to get different exposures on the same sheet of 4x5 film. Um, this is just another thrifted camera made out of a flashlight. Um, and this is like the first 3D printed camera I designed and made. And it was really kind of a it, parts of it are nice, but it's also pretty much a pain. And this was the first sheet of film I got out of it because it was there's so many things to consider. And I really like parts of this, but I destroyed this film trying to get it in the camera and destroyed it trying to get it out of the camera. um but that was a learning experience. And I this is the same camera. I sort of adjusted some things, but I can get a clean clean sheet of film out of there now. But yeah, it was definitely a learning experience. There's like so much good things about starting to print cameras, but it's definitely like a learning curve. But I was able to sort of go like, okay, I can get a roll of 120 film to wind around here and do basically a full 360 like panorama in 5 segments. while the interior has the film sort of wrapped around right there. And then each uh, shutter can be opened individually. Um, and then this I actually made later on, but I figured I'd go over this more simple cameras first. But I really do love, like, I didn't need to print this. I could have found something like this, but just having like a curved film plane is so like, I don't know, I just find it, the way the light falls off and sort of distorts, even if it's just a gentle curve, I really like. This is a cyanotype that I made from that camera, and this is a zeotype that I made from the camera. Um, and then another thing that Pinhole allows is just you could have as many cameras as you want, as many cameras as you make. So like taking a picture of, I had a camera right here on my face and a camera in my hands, and I took a picture at the same time, basically with two cameras, because why not? You can you can do that. So like messing around with different things like that and being able to think about photography like in a way of like kind of like abundance of like, oh, you could, you if you have a problem you could just make a camera to solve it, or if you want to have like, a situation where you're like, well, I need to have like six cameras for that, and that's like, that's fine, you can do that with like some cardboard. um Here's sort of where I started getting into like a slightly more complicated cameras. This is a 120 medium format camera that I put a prism inside of. So like a lot of this stuff is really just like experimentation and sort of excitement about like not knowing what you're going to get. I definitely didn't expect the photos to look anything like this. Like this is how it comes out, how the negative looks. It's like these super sharp lines and then this like weird tri bar in the middle. I guess this picture is a little bit more clear of like, it divides up the image in such a weird and unexpected way. And I feel like there's a lot of stuff in this where I'm just like, you make a camera and you have no idea what it's gonna do. You have an idea of like, oh, I think this could look like this. Um, I took the prism out, and this is sort of what the camera does without the prism, and then like this is what it does with the prism. So this is exactly what the negatives look like. It's really, it's just stuff like I find that super interesting. And even if I don't find the images, like these are all, for the most part, what I've been showing is just tests, but like it is just like super interesting. And that's like part of the fun I think I find in photography, is being like, how the hell did this do this? Like, I have no idea. I would never ever expect there to be these sharp lines on like what is going on. And for this part of the image, like it connects to a different, like it's so bizarre. And trying to wrap your head around that and trying to like inform what you like, it just makes you have more questions about, well, if this does this, then how could I make it even more complicated? Or it just raises another question. This is like the first that I'm going to show for the more like complicated, or not necessarily complicated, but the more cells and the more strange things. So each one of these is an individual aperture, and they're all sort of different shaped cells. Initially for this project, this is actually for a different project that I was working on sort of simultaneously, but it was pretty big overlap. But I was trying to do like these comic book grids to make sort of like a comic in camera, which I still might do, but the project sort of was like, I became more interested in the way that different cells would like line up and create a new picture between them, and sort of like treating this more as like a contact sheet where you're like, oh, these two might look really good together. So you got like these really weird interactions with different parts of the face where it's like things blend into each other. And I took so many of these that like the amount of flash that I had in my eyes was terrible. But yeah, like these weird faces that like you take two pictures and you're not really, I wasn't really anticipating this sort of like the interactions between two different pictures. But that's sort of what this project became, was like finding different images that I thought like there was an interesting pull between um these like two different pictures, and created some sort of like different thing. um this is sort of just like other tests with the same camera. It's sort of, this is the project, and it's actually up at Unique Photo for anybody who's in Philly, showing with the rest of the New Jersey Pinhole Club, who's have there's like a ton of great work up there, especially if you're interested in pinhole. But yeah, so sort of these like, I just took individual like slides of diptychs that I found interesting in those and paired them together. And um, these are all platinum prints. They're pretty bad photos. I just took these with my iPhone, but yeah. Here's sort of like the model of the first camera. I think like this project really started as I wanted to make a camera that could make like pixels basically, and sort of reference like a digital image. I still haven't gotten a photo that I've been like, yep, this is that. This is what I was going for. And I think that largely might rely on like color, using color film, which I'm starting to do. But yeah, like black and white doesn't really read as a pixel ever. It just reads as like a small dot. But this was the first camera that I made sort of attempting to do that. And this is, I model it on a 3D modeling software. And it was a learning curve. It's not like a particularly hard thing to use, but it will take a while to figure out tolerances and different things. So this is how the full camera turns out. This is the main part that you saw in the model, and these are the shutter slides that go across it. For all of these, I just use like a X-Acto knife with a pin on it, and then just any piece of aluminum can, um, just because it's free. And so that's like behind this, and then this front plate covers it. So the actual pinholes aren't 3D printed; they're made out of an actual plate. But this is like the first photo I made with, one of the first photos, successful photos I think that I made with that camera. Um, and yeah, it also still becomes sort of meditative like that earlier work, because these exposures take, you know, that I'm using a strobe, but it still is, it takes a lot of time to do 323 photographs individually. Um, so it becomes sort of like this act of like slowing down and and waiting, which I think a lot of analog photography really like delays this like instant gratification to make something a little bit more magical and a little bit more of like a present that you're giving yourself, which I think is like totally cool. And this is sort of where I found out that like I mean, I noticed it in other things, but this I think is a good example of like how the images are distorted. So like this was just a photograph of my face like head on, but you see that like right here is, should actually be all the way up here. Like if you're looking at the photograph, if that's how I kind of expected it to come out, I thought everything would sort of flip uniformly like it would in a, like as you see through a view camera or through any sort of thing that you're looking through that actually doesn't correct for it. But yeah, so I was expecting to have like, yeah, your face is divided up, but I was definitely not expecting that like the bottom left side of my cheek or the bottom right side would be in the top left, and the bottom, like it completely inverts in every direction. And I drew a diagram later on that'll like show that a little bit clearer, I hope. But then when you take individual photographs, everything looks fine. So like this photograph and this are like individually they work, but then if you have parts of a whole, it divides in a way that you just wouldn't, I would never expect that. And that's like super exciting and fun to see. Here's another one just with different, these are like what I was trying to do with the straw shaped things for a while. Is just I mean, I tried for so long and I learned a lot, like to the point where I could make a camera in 3D print it and have it like accurately be able to do things. But yeah, these are some examples from, you can change the shape of the cells and it's still the same premise in the camera. The camera still has a shutter that moves along a track and opens up small pinholes. But yeah, these are more like examples of sort of taking objects apart. And here's sort of what I probably should have put this earlier on, but this is sort of what the camera is doing. Like if you look at this as the camera itself, and these is the individual cells, and each one of these is a small pinhole. If you see that like this line of light, so whatever's here is actually going to be projected through here and land here, and anything projected here, so right above the head, is going to go down and be projected here. So it inverts, but it inverts everything in the same way. So if you have a whole object that spans sort of this cone that shoots out from these pinholes, they're reflected each time. So where you would think this would connect with this, it doesn't. You have this weird fracturing of the form. But if the object's further away and it fits into all of the cones that these project, that's when you get something that's like, oh, you're just getting repeated basically. I mean, there's slight, it doesn't, it's hard to show it here, but there's slight movement, but you're not getting a form that is disjointed. So it's like, I would never think of that. I think the like normal pinhole picture is pretty easily to conceptualize, but it's just so unintuitive that it would do this weird like fracturing of a form. And I found that to be like, at first like frustrating. Like I was like, oh, this isn't what I wanted it to do. But then it's exciting, and that's sort of why you want to do anything, to learn something and to see something unexpected. So yeah, I probably should have put this a little earlier on, but this sort of falls in line with that. I started making, in order to like compensate for that, like not necessarily compensate, but in order to work with that, I started tapering all of the cells. So instead of them going straight forward, they actually like branch apart. So like that's why these look a little bit different. It's really kind of hard to see. I wonder if they have one of those cameras here, but like you can see it's kind of, there's a point between here and here where it fans out. So you can control that, like, and based on what you do, then you can get like, a full figure, a full head. And some of the other ones were fanned out as well, but that was the first picture of them. But like, yeah, you can sort of control how much the camera distorts a face and what's repeated, and based on that and your distance to the camera, you make really specific cameras that are like, this camera can do basically like one thing, like what a lens similar to like a portrait lens, it's like you're going to do this with your portrait lens. Like this camera, you probably want to be this distance from it if you want to do this, and if it's further away it's going to do something completely different. Like um but yeah, so a benefit of doing 3D printing is you just can make so many cameras without like absolutely destroying your hands and your fingers, like cutting tons of objects. Like when I was trying to make cameras before, it was just like, oh, this is going to take like 24 hours and it's going to really like eventually wear on you. But anyway, so like, this camera is a panoramic camera with 23 cells, I guess, in it, bars that then like I was saying, the way things connect is just unexpected. Like, because it takes it all at once, everything becomes like not matching together. And, if I went in and I digitally flipped each one, it would create a scene that you would see as more legible, but you have to like bring everything to a different position. And I think this is like exciting to sort of jumble up the world and like totally fracture what you're seeing and kind of feed out like a new image. I think this is just another like way of seeing what that camera does. Um, this is just a street. Like I was in the middle of a road and it completely divides lines in a way where you're like, I would never ever expect that. And I think that's like a lot of this is like doing stuff and then finding a workaround and finding like accepting the way things are and embracing that. This is just a similar style camera, but it's flat. And if you move the camera along, you can compensate for the direction being sort of wrong, and make a full image the way that it would normally connect. You just have to do everything inverted. So like this isn't a really good example, but this like you I took all these pictures individually, um, and then you just have to do like, oh, your top left picture is actually your bottom right picture, so you go to the bottom right part of the space or whatever and take that. And so you have to sort of train your brain to be like, oh, everything's going to be inverted, which is fun to do. And also like you end up with these weird like trees that sort of fit together and sometimes repeat and repeat over here because you're not exactly sure where everything's going to fall in line. But yeah, a lot of like these pictures that are in the show are like sort of investigating space and the camera and being able to like see how many possibilities you could get from making your own camera that like would be kind of hard and confusing to do with like a ready-made camera. And you can also still sort of use them as another just like way of making a like normal contact sheet, if you would. But it's kind of, you can get these clean like lines and something that looks like, I feel like, more presentable as a piece as opposed to like, oh, I did a contact sheet. It's like, oh, this looks like almost like you put it together, but you're doing everything in camera. Um, this is sort of towards the end, but this is 1023 pinholes, which is like, I think I might have one with more that sort of didn't work, but this is sort of what I was going for with the pixels. And I think if I use color film, it would make a little bit more sense, but I do need to get like more precise. But yeah, this is another portrait, and similar to like the portraits I was doing with the straws, it's like I've been trying, I have this like idea in my head and it brings me down to like so many different roads, which I think is super exciting. And what I'm interested in art and photography is just like having a vision of something you want and it brings you like all of these projects and all these different things that like, even if you don't have what you initially set out for, you end up with like so much more interesting stuff you learned, and like greater respect for like what your vision was and what possibilities there are. um here's another sort of like more recent one that I've made, just like seeing that like, oh, you can make your cells a little bit a different distance from your film plane and things will blend into each other, um and you can make any different shape you want, like, and have these things overlap and interact. Here's sort of like a less a different test, I guess, which I guess you'll be able to see here. Like, here's how I started testing out different shapes for pinholes and stuff like that, like different weird designs and structures, and adding like tons of holes in different places. Like, this picture was made with a camera, not with this one, but with a larger version of this, where you have like a ton of pinholes in sort of a concentric circles. Um, yeah, so I don't know, just a lot of like playing around, and I don't know, changing where you're making your image from starting your image at the point of taking the image to going all the way back to like designing a camera and thinking about what you want to make and making these like weird cameras to make them. This is sort of the last camera I'm going to show, but it's just a medium format version of a lot of the cameras I've made before. And here's like sort of the color version, and shows like what I'm headed towards, after this is like I've got a ton of different projects I want to do, which is like always the case, but I'm still looking to be able to do that pixelated film thing. And I think like I'm getting towards it. I think this is more successful, and the color film definitely makes it like pop in a way. But yeah, like I think most of what I wanted to get across is just like my approach to image making and how it's changed with like making my own cameras, and how like I just find it really exciting, and even like being a part of like the New Jersey Pinhole Club is really fun because there's so many people who are also working with pinhole cameras who are having similar mindset of like how do you how do you make a new interesting camera to make a new different image, and I just think that's pretty fun. So thanks. I think that's everything I got.
Thank you, Jacob.
Yeah.
Was quite a journey. Like people talk about their photographic journey, but it seems like you're really on a journey where like one thing leads you to another thing that's unexpected, and that leads you to something else that's unexpected, and all of these like unexpected things that happen are seen just like a challenge to continue and like keep experimenting, like so much experimentation
Yeah.
is really
Yeah. I think that's like the fun of like all of this is just unexpected stuff that changes your your like previous thoughts, changing your mind all the time.
well, and being open to it and open-minded. Like sometimes if someone tries something and it's not what they expected, they're like, "Oh God," and they kind of give up on whatever they're trying to do. But you're kind of embracing the fact that you might not get what you initially anticipated, but it might be worth like further interrogation.
Yeah, I think like also sometimes like a new thing can either seem like, if it's not what you expect, it can be a disappointment, or but as you sit with it, you can realize like, oh, maybe this is the most exciting part of it. Like oftentimes that happens where you're like, I didn't expect this to happen, and then you sit with it for a little while and you're like, that's the best part of this, like, is that it looks different like this, and it looks weird and kind of like like uncomfortable. You're like, oh, actually, as I'm getting used to this, that's the point of it. That's what is like beautiful about it.
Mm. That's great. I think I failed to mention the date of the opening for the show in the intro. So if those of you who are local or might be coming to Philly this weekend, the opening is going to be on Saturday. I believe it's 5 to 8 p.m. So come on by and you can see Jacob's work in person. And I also wanted to mention that I think I told you this, Jacob. I think so. You're the first person from our like direct local Halide community that's been selected by a guest juror as the Living Image Grand Prize winner. So like we're especially excited to have that. Like you're our first. So
Yeah, I'm honored and excited to be part of it. Yeah.
yeah. Um, if anybody has any questions, you can feel free to go into the chat and type them in there. Or there's a raise hand function if you want to click on that. It'll show up on my screen and then I'll allow you to enable your mic. So if anyone has questions, comments, I mean, I can't wait to see them in person and just like the crazy amount of work and experimentation that you've put into like designing and then also building the cameras is pretty like incredible. Did you
Yeah.
do you have a 3D printer at home? Like,
Yeah, I got a 3D printer 6 months ago, and I was debating on different things to get, and I am so happy I got it. I'm like, I use it all the time. I mean, yeah, I don't really like it's totally not something that I would ever think I would buy, and I never saw a point of getting one. And then as I was doing this, I was like, this might work, but I wasn't even that enthusiastic. I was like, it might work, but I don't know. I think these things might be kind of whack, and I don't really want more technology around me. But yeah, I use it constantly.
I mean, I think it's a tool. It's like a means to an end, right? Like if
Yeah.
you're poking thousands of holes. Wait, are you
I'm
still actually
I'm
poking the hole? You are into
still
the
poking thousands of holes, which
metal. Uh,
is um still a pain, but compared to like building the body of the camera, that takes a lot more time and is like with this like sort of I mean it's simple, it's just an exacto thing with but it's kind of okay to poke the holes and I've gotten less precious about it, especially when there's like 1,000 plus holes. Like I'm sort of going at a clip. I'm not like sort of drilling it slowly. So yeah, I still have that's the like big time component and designing. I spend a lot more time designing cameras now, but it's less hard on my like hands and stuff like that.
how long does it take the printer to print one of the cameras?
A sort of a standard like 4x5 camera is you could probably depend it depends on how complicated it is and how much like I have a lot of interchangeable components like all the backs are the same to the cameras so I only need to print the fronts but generally I would say like 6 to 8 hours for a 4x5 full like all the components of it but I definitely have some cameras that are longer and some that are much shorter like if you're not doing a full size camera.
Oh, let's see. We do have a question from James Provenzano. Great presentation and amazing work, Jacob. I understand you are also looking at working with zone plates. Could you say a few words on your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I started doing that pretty recently. I wonder if I might have one over. Here's sort of like a larger one, but I was using like, I don't know if people are familiar with it, but um, I was using ortholitho film in like a 35 millimeter camera to make and taking pictures of basically like a printout of a zone plate. Um, and then you use that instead of the pinhole. And it allows more light in and kind of makes a more diffuse image, but I'm still testing it. I do really like this sort of hazy effect that you get from a zone plate and the way it deals with light. But yeah, I think like it allows you to do certain things that are harder with pinhole just because of lack of ability to get light in there. Like you can photograph in lower light scenarios easier. And it has different effects. So yeah, I'm excited about it, but I definitely it's still pretty early on in figuring out how to make your own zone plates. And they're weirdly expensive to buy for what they really are. It's like the only place where you can that I found to buy them is like, I don't know, pretty expensive for a piece of plastic. Yeah. Um, but yeah.
Right. Anybody else have questions? Again, you can put them in the chat or you can use the raise hand function. And if you do that, you can ask with your voice. Melanie says, your approach to pinhole photography is impressive. How hard was it to get a general design foundation for a light tight camera when you started using the 3D printer?
Um, it takes I think I found that I was like making the cameras more robust in the beginning, and having I do a lot of like most of the cameras have multiple walls, so like most every camera I make will have multiple walls that fit into, I don't think I have a back near me, but the back will also have multiple walls, and that's annoying. With you have to find out your tolerance basically, so that you can have them fit together and not be too, so that is frustrating in the beginning, and eventually when you figure out those numbers you just write them down and you can compensate. But the programs themselves are pretty, if you have like, I use Fusion 360, which is free, and if you're familiar with like Photoshop, you can sort of translate some of the stuff. But yeah, it is a little frustrating in the beginning, but getting light tight isn't hard once you like real like I am sure there's other ways to do it, but like if you use two walls on your cameras, then um you don't need to use like electrical tape after the fact. And I haven't had in any of my cameras that I've made with this design, I never have light leaks. So that's what the way I would go about it. But if you are a little bit more carefree and you want to use like um, ortholitho film or some sort of, or paper negatives and go into a dark room and then put electrical tape around your camera afterwards, you could make one pretty easily. But yeah, if you want to make one that like functions a little bit faster or a little bit easier, that's how I do it. But if you want to put like a 4x5 back on it, I think that would be probably even easier because you can use like some sort of light tight um, foam, like a light seal, so that you can press up and you get a little bit more wiggle room. So that's like, there's definitely a lot of approaches. It is a pain if you want to make a box with multiple walls fit into each other at the same time, but it's I did it. It's not that hard. It's not like impossible. It just will take you probably a week. Yeah.
Great. All right. Anybody else have questions, comments? All right. So hopefully we'll see most of you at the opening on Saturday, 5 to 8 at Halide. Yeah, and for those of you who can't make it, thank you for coming tonight. And then, like I mentioned before, you'll also get a chance to hear from Denise and Millie in May, I think the 26th, and June, the first or second Monday in June. Let's see, June 9th. So hopefully we'll see you there. And last chance for questions. All right, looks like we're good. Thank you so much, Jacob. It was really interesting. Like I've seen the digital versions of your work, but it was really, really cool to see like the cameras that you're making and like all the iterations that went up to like what you're doing now. It's really cool.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It
Thank
was
you.
really fun.
Good night, and thank you to everyone else, and good night.